This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Welcome to the Christmas edition of the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast.
Merry Christmas, Sam.
Merry Christmas, Richard. It is that time has now come upon us. It has been the season of Advent, and we hope that this Christmas, everyone who's listening is having a good Christmas and hopefully spending quality time with family. But Richard, I know we're going to have a bunch of family time in the next few days here. You excited to have all the chicks under one roost?
Yeah, I tell you, when you have 8 grandkids all together at once, that is always a bit chaotic, but a lot of fun, and certainly around Christmas time, just being around kids adds the joy, the mystery, the fun of Christmas.
You sort of get a do-over of I feel like of Christmas, like once you start having kids, and especially when they're young. It's just to me, it's the most exciting part of Christmas.
Watching them just come out, seeing the presents and opening and all the excitement, just the traditions. One thing I'd say that I've seen our kids do, and Lisa and I try to do this, is you sort of develop some traditions, and it doesn't really matter what the tradition is so much. Certainly if it's upbeat and fun and joyful, that's great. But just something that you do. It could be a food that you eat or a game you play or just some activity you do at the holidays that makes that kind of special. And I think that's kind of missing, I think, in some modern families today where you say, well, it's at Christmas, we always do this. And of course, you don't do it to be a burden. It's because it's special. It's fun. We've got the crokinole board that my Canadian listeners will recognize, but we typically bring it out at Christmas time. They're the holidays, and then we put it away. We don't really play it for July 4th. It's something you kind of do over the Christmas holidays, and then you store it away till then. But I think that does something kind of magical for kids when there's certain tradition, and it's always
for
fun
adults, I think too.
Yeah, and I think, but it's interesting. Like kids, and your wife, my daughter, was. It's funny. I think the younger kids in our family, especially, it was like she could. We had to do that because that was tradition, and you can't neglect it. My wife is, in some ways, always revolutionary, ready to do something new and try something different, and yet traditions are such that it's like, well, that's what makes this special, is that we do this. And so I'm excited about that, and I hope all of our listeners are going to just have a great Christmas as well, make some memories, push your work away for a few days, and just enjoy what really matters in life.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the important thing too, just about holidays in general, but especially Christmas, is you have the excuse to step out of the mundane for a little bit. You know, so much of life is hard work and drudgery and routine and all the rest of that, and it's all, that's good and it has its place, but there is something I just think really refreshing about being able to break from your routine, to break from the mundane, to do things you only do this time of year. And I think that's what makes it special.
Yeah, there's certain food like Nanaimo bars I basically make at Christmas time.
Yeah, chocolate babka is one, and Carrie makes a really delicious hot chocolate that we only do at Christmas time. So
there's a reason some things you only should do once a year.
Yeah, and only one glass of that, and that'll set you up for life.
Well, I want us to look today at a passage well known in Isaiah chapter 9. And let me just read a couple of those verses and just maybe comment on it. It says, "Nevertheless, the gloom of the distressed land will not be like that of the former times, when he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will bring honor to the way of the sea, to the land east of the Jordan, and to Galilee of the nations. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness. You have enlarged the nation and increased its joy. The people have rejoiced before you as they rejoice at harvest time, and as they rejoice when dividing spoils. For you have shattered their oppressive yoke and the rod on their shoulders, the staff of their oppressor, just as you did on the day of Midian. For every trampling boot of battle and the bloodied garments of war will be burned as fuel for the fire. For a child will be born for us, a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. The dominion will be vast, and its prosperity will never end. He will reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forever. The zeal of the Lord of armies will accomplish this. Of course, we hear the passages like this every Christmas, and I thought it would just be a good passage just to reflect on here this week as we look at Christmas. And it starts off in a kind of a dismal mood. Of course, Isaiah, much of this, in the early part especially, is written in the context of Assyria, the world superpower that was making inroads into the whole area of Israel, and ultimately would take away the northern tribes into exile and would destroy Samaria. And Naphtali and Zebulun were two of the tribes that were in the northern part of Israel. And so the reason that's important is because whenever people like the Babylonians or Assyrians or Persians, when they would invade, they would always come in from the north. Egypt would come in from the south, but the other invaders, they typically came down a highway and entered from the north. That's how Abraham and Sarah, when they entered into the promised land, they traveled that same highway. And so if you were the tribes in the north, you felt you were the first people impacted by an invader. And if you were farther to the south, you might feel less the impact. So it's saying these lands that have suffered the most from invaders and enemies, God is going to do a great work where they will celebrate. Of course, that's where Jesus will grow up and where Jesus will do much of his ministry. Is going to be in Galilee, which is in the north of Jerusalem. And so I love the fact that with God has a way, and really what Christmas represents is that God invades the darkness of our world, the need, the hopelessness, the pain. And the whole message of Christmas is God himself comes to the very people that life has been beating up, that life has been casting in darkness. And it says that he shines a light. And so verse 2 says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. And darkness is just one of those metaphors that Scripture uses often to describe what it's like living in a world that is dominated by lies, falsehood, evil, and it's considered a dark place. And when things are dark, you don't see very clearly. And when things are dark, you feel vulnerable because you can't really see where your enemy might be lurking around you. It's hard to prepare yourself, never knowing when evil might strike. And so when you shine a great light, you make it much more difficult for evil to attack. And we spent some time this year just at our own house, just overhauling the light system outside so that at night, when it gets dark, it lights up the front of our house and the driveway. And they're just, you feel more secure with light. And so the coming of Jesus was a coming of light, coming of truth. A coming of exposure. Of course, if you're evil, then you don't want to be around light. You don't want the light to shine on you. But if you are looking for safety and security and truth, then the more light, the better. So it says that there has been a great light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness. And I think we all probably would agree that we live in a land of darkness today. Deception, spin, falsehood, things that are evil that are called good, and things that are good that are called evil. And when Jesus comes near, he sheds light, and sometimes we always wonder, well, why do atheists or why do other religions hate Jesus so much? Why do they feel so hostile toward Christianity? Well, that's because Christianity promotes truth, and there are those who have no interest in the truth. And verse 3 says, "You have enlarged the nation and increased its joy." Of course, when you enlarge a nation, then it means you've had success. It means you've had prosperity. It means you're growing, expanding, increasing your influence. And it says he's increased his joy. And so the coming of Jesus has always been to increase people's joy. When the angels announced to the shepherds, we bring you great news of great joy, the gospel, the word gospel itself means good news. It's a message that brings great joy.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, the people have rejoiced before you as they rejoice at harvest time. And of course, harvest time, if you're a farmer, that is the celebration time. That's when you party, when the harvest, when it's a bumper crop and you filled all of your barns and all your storage containers full of grain and produce, and you know it's going to be a good year, a good winter, because you got lots of food put away. And that same joy, Isaiah says, is how you feel when the Messiah comes, when God comes near. And Christmas, hopefully, is a time for our listeners where you feel particularly close to Jesus. And we certainly would encourage you some point during the holiday. I know that oftentimes you've got out-of-town guests and family and meals and extra things that you're doing for the holidays. But I find sometimes you might just need to get up early, maybe start a fire, get a good warm cup of coffee, and maybe mix in a little bit of non-alcoholic eggnog into it, and get your Bible and just say, God, I really want to be sure that I draw near to you, because I want to have the joy that comes from being close to you.
Mark your calendars for May 15th to 17th, 2024. Richard is going to be at the Cove at the Billy Graham Training Center outside of Asheville, North Carolina. The seminar is going to be on the ways of God, and you can register at thecove.org. We'll leave links for that in the show notes. I will say, if you do sign up for the Ways of God conference in May, do let us know, because Richard would love to hear from you. He's not able to necessarily eat with everyone, but if you give us enough heads up that you're going to be coming and would love to have a meal with Richard, we will definitely do our best to get you on the list and at least be able to share one meal with Richard. So we hope to see you at the Billy Graham Training Center in May. Links to all of that will be in the show notes.
Verse 4 says, "For you have shattered their oppressive yoke and the rod on their shoulders, the staff of their oppressor, just as you did on the day of Midian. For every trampling boot of battle and the bloody garments of war will be burned as fuel for the fire." And that, of course, the story of Midian was 7 years of oppression. The Midianites would come in and just like a plague of locusts would just ravage the land, take everything of value from the Israelite farmers. And when you saw the Midianites coming over the ridge and down toward your plot of land, you knew you were going to lose everything. You knew that there'd be nothing left. They would be heartless, and they could care less about the hardship that they were going to cause you. And so when they're defeated and you're set free, and you know that enemy's not coming anymore, there's just a tremendous sense of joy that comes. And even that idea that even their boots, a lot of times in ancient warfare, you might strip the clothes off of a warrior and keep them, because you could use those boots and you could use that sword or whatever it is that they had. But it's kind of saying here that the victory will be so complete over your enemy that all you can do is just pile up a lot of the clothes and the various things that they were using and just burn them up because they're just taking up space. It's really describing a total, complete victory over the enemy, where you don't even have to bother trying to pick through anything of value. You don't even need that because there's so much there. And then you get to verse 6, which kind of is the heart of that. It says, "For a child will be born for us, a son will be given to us." And again, we've talked about this, but the ways of God are not our ways. And if these people needed a deliverer, you would think that God would have just sent a ready-made, fully grown, mature warrior king to come and rescue his people. But he sends his answer in the form of a baby. And babies are the most helpless, vulnerable human being that there is. And why God would provide his answer in such a fragile container is a mystery to us. But I have found that often God's answers to us come, in a sense, in a fragile way. If you're careless with God's answer, it can be lost. If you neglect God's answer, it could be gone. God's answer to our problems can sometimes come in very vulnerable, fragile ways that you need to treat with great care. Relationships can bring great joy, but they can also be fragile. You have to treat them with care. And the gifts of God sometimes are that way. And so God gives a child. But he says the government will be on his shoulders. Basically, God's kingdom, God's rule will rest on the shoulders of this child. He may be small in stature, but great in power. And again, we've talked about this before, but sometimes the most powerful things are the small things, the things that you might take for granted. And then he says what his names will be. And of course, the name represents your character. It represents what they're like, what they value, what they do. And it says, first, they'll be named Wonderful Counselor. And I'll tell you what, some of us have been to a counselor before, and that can be a wonderful experience where you bring some maybe confusing circumstances in your life, or maybe you're getting a consultant, somebody that is an expert, and you're facing a problem in your business or your church, and you have a counselor who comes in to give you counsel, to share wisdom with you. And this person's a wonderful counselor because their counsel is always wonderful. I tell you what, if you have someone that every time they counsel you, it's wonderful what they give you, you're going to want to spend a lot of time talking to them. You're going to be always asking questions, seeking their guidance. And Isaiah says this gift of God, this Messiah, the Savior, he's a wonderful counselor. And we've at times encouraged our listeners to say, when you're praying to God, sometimes you need to use the word that you need him to be to you. There's times where you need a counselor. And so it's okay to pray to the wonderful counselor and say, wonderful counselor, right now that's what I need you to be in my life. I need counsel I can trust, counsel that's not biased, counsel that always tells me the absolute truth. And then it says, mighty God. He is a wonderful counselor, but he's got the power to back it up. He's a mighty, all-powerful God. And so even as when the shepherds came or the wise men came and saw this child or a baby, that he might have appeared small, but he was a mighty God, and he was powerful. And then the eternal Father, he is a father. He's a wonderful counselor, but he's more than that. He's a father, but he's an eternal Father. And Sam, you and I are aware my father is getting older, more fragile. I picked him up for church the other day, and he has difficulty walking on his own right now. Uses a walker. Sometimes he's in a wheelchair. He was a great dad, but he can't really be the father that he used to be to me. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the strength anymore. Doesn't have the mind that he had then. And I miss that. I wish that he was still the father he used to be. But he's human and he's mortal, just like all the rest, every other father. And so we watch our fathers grow weak and frail and old over time. But this God will be an eternal father. He's always going to have his strength. He'll never decline in power or ability over time. And he will always be that perfect father to you. Sometimes, and again, not everyone has had a wonderful father experience. You and I have been fortunate, but God will always be that perfect father to us that we can go to and know that he is never distracted. He's never frail. He's never just consumed with his own aches and pains, but he cares about us. And then finally, he's a Prince of Peace, and that means that his rule is characterized by peace. It's a peace that surpasses all understanding. And there are times where I think it's great to pray to the Prince of Peace. Maybe you just need to say, Prince of Peace, this Christmas season this year is pretty chaotic for me. There's a lot of bills, there's a lot of problems, there's some crises or conflicts, and maybe I've got family coming together that it could be quite volatile. And so, Prince of Peace, I just need you to rule in my home with peace this year. And of course, if you're following the Prince of Peace, if the Prince of Peace is your prince guiding your life, then guess what he's going to be having you do? To be bringing peace as well. His kingdom is characterized by peace because all those who follow his rule are going to value peace. They're going to be peaceable. And so, there are times where we all face situations where we could respond to someone in one way that adds fuel to the fire, or we could respond a different way that brings peace. And certainly over the holidays is a great time to just say, I don't have to necessarily say everything that I think or that comes to mind. Why would I say things that disturbs the peace? This is just not the time for that. And so you just might not want to talk about politics or economics or college football during the holidays. You might just prefer to be peaceable because you follow the Prince of Peace. And then it just says the dominion will be vast. God's kingdom is going to keep growing. It's going to keep expanding. And it's interesting to me that I've talked to several people in the know of late who said that two of the places right now where Christianity is growing rapidly, one is Iran, and interestingly enough, the other is in Afghanistan, which Afghanistan is known for being brutal in subjugating Christianity, and yet the Prince of Peace can extend his kingdom even in some of the most unlikely places. And I certainly over Christmas, I always am reminded, certainly of countries where you can't celebrate openly Christmas or talk about Christ without repercussions. And just to say, Prince of Peace, I pray that the day comes where your rule is so vast and complete that even in those countries, you can now celebrate Christ there too. And so there's a lot of places not experiencing peace at Christmas time. And so I think that as a Christian, we ought to be aware of that and praying about that and pray that his dominion will spread to those places as well. And then it concludes and says, and its prosperity will never end. He will reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forever. And again, there's people that are kind of hard on the church and saying, well, I don't know that I'm a big fan of the church anymore because of how it's behaving. And yet I would have to say, but Christ, if he's ruling over the church, if he's the head of the church, or if this is God's kingdom, then why would I not want to support something that Christ is the head of? If it's his kingdom, then I want to be a part of that, even if it's filled up with frail human beings that can disappoint. And then it just kind of closes that passage and says, the zeal of the Lord of armies will accomplish this. And what the prophet is saying is the zeal of God will make sure this takes place. And I'm so grateful that God, who rules the universe, is zealous about his rule on this planet. Our planet is so insignificant in so many ways compared to what else is in the universe. And yet God zealously works out his plans, his purposes on this earth. And I'm so glad that when I'm not always zealous for the things of God, that God continues to be zealous to carry out his plans, his purposes, and everything that he intends for this earth, for people, for his kingdom. He works on that night and day. And so even at Christmas, when sometimes we could be distracted, perhaps while we're distracted, God continues day by day to zealously expand his kingdom and to rule it with peace and righteousness. And I think as we see one year coming to a close and a new year about to begin, our prayer needs to be that that same Savior that Isaiah spoke about centuries and centuries ago, that we would continue to pray that he will zealously continue to spread his rule around this earth, and that there will be peace and goodwill among people.
Well, thank you, Richard, for that reminder. And once again, a Merry Christmas to all of our listeners. Yeah. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.